A news report breaks. A new dungeon has appeared in Tokyo. Watching is our main character, a high schooler named Yuma Mitaka. He's not watching the news, but a popular dungeon streamer. The streamer explores the 18th floor, surrounded by monsters. The performance ends as he prepares to unleash his power. A blast of lightning obliterates the unsuspecting creature. He proudly displays the magic stone dropped by the monster. Yuma scowls as the streamer celebrates his massive payday. To him, this whole dungeon industry is just a pathetic joke, but it's a world built on monsters, magic, and the stones they leave behind. He knows it's all a fantasy for the privileged few. The elite are cultivated by massive corporations. They're officially sanctioned by the government itself. Popularity and sponsorships create these modern-day heroes. For an ordinary guy like Yuma, the world is just unfair. Suddenly, reality itself seems to shatter beside him. The commotion draws the attention of a man from inside. His dog, Mizu, is usually calm but is now frantic. Yuma peers outside, wondering who's in their yard. He's convinced that no matter what he does, it's all pointless. He walks away, convinced he has no talent or future. This was the grim reality he had accepted for himself. Until he found this right in his own backyard. A massive, perfectly round crater has appeared. He cautiously steps inside, flashlight in hand. It's not a sinkhole, it's a tunnel leading somewhere. He hears a faint sound from the darkness ahead. And of course, something answers back, because why not? A small, gelatinous creature emerges into the light. Yuma can only stare, completely baffled by the creature. Back inside, Yuma has a sudden flash of recognition. He quickly pulls up a monster database on his phone. The creature is a slime, but a rare metallic variant. And then, a staggering detail catches his eye. A metal slime has never been successfully defeated before. He tries to laugh it off to deny the absurd possibility. He tells himself only a fool would enter that tiny hole. But the desperate hope in his eyes tells a different story. The streamer's voice echoes in his mind, a warning of the risks, but also a glittering promise of unimaginable rewards. The streamer's voice calls it a dream, a once-in-a-lifetime chance. And so, Yuma stands at the precipice of his own destiny. Inside the narrow tunnel, the slime has nowhere to run. He arms himself with a simple household hammer. How dangerous could a tiny gelatinous blob really be? With all his might, he brings the weapon down, but the hammer simply bounces off its metallic hide. The creature suddenly springs to life, moving with impossible speed. It slams into his arm with surprising, painful force. Yuma retreats, nursing his bruised arm and shattered ego. He collapses onto the couch, utterly defeated by the tiny monster. He even warns his dog Mizu to stay away from the dangerous hole. He pulls up his phone, desperately searching for a weakness. The monster database claims slimes are weak enough for a child to beat. It claims they're slow and easily beaten with physical attacks. But only deep dungeon monsters are supposed to require magic. Magic, a power he simply doesn't possess. So much for our hero's grand debut. But then a thought cuts through his despair. If the creature is truly made of metal, what is metal's weakness? If he can't use magic, he'll just have to burn it. He finds the next best thing, a household blowtorch. Armed with his brilliant new plan, he returns to the crater. He takes aim, ready to melt the creature into a puddle. But the slime is faster, stretching and slamming into his face. The blow sends him reeling, his plan literally backfiring. And once again, Yuma is defeated on his living room floor. He's completely given up, utterly broken by the tiny monster. His only thought now is to board up the hole and forget everything. Reporting it would just be a bureaucratic nightmare, and he's had enough. He tells himself this chance was never really his to begin with. It's just another chapter in a life defined by disappointment. He boards up the crater, trying to bury the entire ordeal. He sits in his room, staring blankly at the world outside. He tries to convince himself to just walk away and forget, but he can't shake the obsession with that tiny, impossible monster. Then, a memory from his childhood surfaces from the depths. He remembers something he'd stored away in his closet long ago. He tears through his room, searching for one last, desperate option. And then he finds it. A sudden spark of renewed determination. He holds up his secret weapon, a can of instant cooling spray. His logic is simple. If you can freeze a bug in its tracks, why not a metal slime? The new plan is a two-step combo. Freeze it solid, then blast it with the blowtorch. With a grim look, he decides this is it. If this fails, he's giving up for good. Standing before the dungeon entrance, he declares this his final all-or-nothing challenge. He sits on the edge, steeling his nerves for one last dive into the unknown. Peering inside, he notices the slime never seems to venture out of its little side tunnel. The creature is just hiding in the corner, seemingly trapped with no escape route. Yuma carefully places his gear, setting the stage for his scientific beatdown. He unleashes the freezing spray, coating the slime in a layer of frost before reaching for the torch. He blasts the creature with the cooling spray, not realizing his critical mistake. A quick glance at the warning label reveals the spray is also highly flammable. He scrambles back, realizing the enclosed space is now a ticking time bomb of gas. But his reckless plan is actually working. The slime is frozen solid. The creature's metallic body has become incredibly brittle from the sudden temperature drop. Yuma knows this is his chance. One solid hit should be enough to shatter it. Cracks begin to form across the slime's frozen surface, confirming its vulnerability. He quickly grabs the hammer he brought, preparing for the final decisive strike. With tears of desperation, he raises his weapon, ready to finally turn the tables. He brings the hammer down with all his might, determined to end this fight for good. The metallic shell finally gives way, dissolving into smoke. Exhausted but triumphant, Yuma realizes he's actually done it. He peers into the tunnel, searching for his prize, but finds nothing. A hollow laugh escapes his lips. All that effort for zero reward. He tries to convince himself the experience alone was worth it. And so, the curtain falls on his strange battle with the slime. The city settles into a quiet, ordinary night. This was supposed to be the end of the story. But the next morning, a violent crash shatters the peace. His mother asks him to check on Mizu, who's causing a ruckus outside. Yuma heads outside, with Mizu frantically leading the way. The dog is growling at the boarded-up crater from yesterday. Yuma rips away the planks, a dreadful suspicion dawning on him. And just as he feared, the metal slime has returned. Meanwhile, halfway across the world in Tel Aviv, Israel, we find the headquarters of the International Dungeon Research Organization. Here, a leading authority on dungeon studies, Ethan Noble, observes. His assistant calls out to him, trying to get his attention. Clark Griffin can only watch as his boss seems completely captivated by something. Ethan remarks that no matter how many times he sees it, he never tires of the view. Ethan explains their focus, a stone slab from the deepest dungeon, Orpheus. It was inscribed with a prophecy, one he seems to find quite fascinating. When the king of monsters awakens, the world will walk the path of ruin. Back in Japan, Yuma looks like he's already living through that ruin. He walks to school, his mind consumed by one single recurring thought. Slime. Lost in his thoughts, he's suddenly jolted back to reality by a collision. It's his childhood friend, Ichino Sena, who seems less than thrilled with his greeting. She teases him for being early, a rare sight for the usually tardy Yuma. She wonders if becoming a third year has finally made him more responsible. But Yuma can only deflect, the weight of his future pressing down on him. Sena tries to make conversation, bringing up a mutual friend. She mentions their old friend Rui wants to work for a dungeon company. The word dungeon hits a little too close to home for Yuma. Sena finds it odd, considering the industry seems so unstable. But she quickly corrects herself, saying the business is actually booming. Yuma is stunned, realizing how little he knows about his own world. She explains that different dungeons offer unique resources. For example, white dungeons produce stones with healing powers. Apparently, everyone but Yuma knew this. She admires their friend for having such a clear vision for the future. And then she turns the question on him, asking about his own plans. The question hangs in the air, leaving Yuma adrift in his own uncertainty. He forces a smile, claiming he's given it some thought. Back home, his research reveals a crucial piece of dungeon lore. Monsters respawn, but their magic stones have an abysmal drop rate. And suddenly, the slime's return makes a terrifying kind of sense. It's not a new monster. It's the same one, back for another round. Yuma's mind latches onto a single critical number, 1%. His plan is simple, almost childishly so. 1 kill a day for 100 days. A rare monster must drop a rare stone, one potentially worth a fortune. And just like that, 100 million yen seems all but guaranteed. Sena continues to admire their friend for having such a clear future. But Yuma is struck by a sudden, life-altering realization. For the first time, he believes a profitable future might be possible. He stands before the crater, convinced his fortune is within reach. But he had yet to understand the true cruelty of his new plan. Day 1 of the 100-day challenge begins, and it ends with the same resounding, prizeless failure. His frustration mounts with every swing of the hammer. The slime dissolves, but once again there is no magic stone. He climbs out, utterly defeated by the brutal laws of probability. He panics, realizing his allowance is disappearing into gas and cooling spray. He slumps over the crater, admitting to Mizu that he's exhausted and getting nowhere. His loyal dog can only offer licks of encouragement in return, but a thought cuts through his self-pity. He can't afford to keep gambling like this. His money and supplies sprout wings, flying away towards a distant 100 million yen dream. He finds himself seriously wondering where he can buy his supplies in bulk. This is the life of Yuma Mitaka, a high schooler whose biggest concern is the market price of industrial coolant. Sina's question about his future echoes in his mind, a constant reminder of what's at stake. And so, he stocks up, ready to continue his war of attrition against the slime. Another day, another trip to the backyard battlefield. He stands over the crater, the weight of his routine pressing down. A single question echoes in his mind. Is this really his future? The days turn into weeks and winter settles over the city. Time marches on, but for Yuma, every day is exactly the same. At school, Sina greets him with a cheerful smile and a heavy bag. But Yuma is too lost in his own world to engage in idle chatter. He's so focused on his slime problem, he's forgotten it's Valentine's Day. He asks what she'll do with all the chocolate she's received. She offers him some, but Yuma is apparently not a fan of free sweets. He immediately backtracks, claiming he's a huge fan of sweets. She brings up their friend Rui again, who wants to work in the dungeon industry. But Yuma plays it cool, pretending he couldn't care less. She then changes the subject, asking about a girl named Kaidi. He's completely baffled, admitting his chocolate-free streak is several years long. She seems genuinely curious, as she'd assumed he got some every year. The school bell rings, signaling the end of their conversation, and Yuma is left alone with his thoughts, lost in the cosmos. The bell's chime brings him crashing back to reality. After school, he finds himself spying on someone from a distance. He's not exactly being subtle, pacing back and forth like a cartoon spy. His stealth mission is interrupted by a sharp smack to the back. It's the girl from the conversation, Kaidi, who calls him out for being weird. Yuma admits he was waiting for her, loitering by the school gate. She offers him a Valentine's gift, assuming he didn't get any others. He tries to save face, claiming he gets a few gifts here and there. His pride quickly evaporates as he asks to see the chocolate. She playfully demands a proper thank you before handing it over. Kaidi beams, pleased with his reluctant thanks. And with that, the two of them head off together down the street. But Kaidi calls out to him, stopping him in his tracks. Yuma asks why she gave him chocolate, but not their mutual friend Rui. She turns away, saying the reason should be obvious. It's just a pity gift to balance things out for her childhood friend. And with that single comment, Yuma's soul leaves his body. Night falls over the city, but his humiliation keeps him awake. A new day dawns, bringing with it the same old routine. He's back home, still fuming over her balancing comment. He takes all his pent-up frustration out on his backyard problem. With a furious cry, he vows to finally put an end to the slime. He stands over the spot where the slime dissolved, utterly spent. He wonders what he's even doing with his life anymore. It feels like nothing good will ever happen to him. But behind him, something begins to materialize from the dust. Yuma turns, his eyes wide with disbelief. A dark energy swirls and takes shape in the air. And there it is. The prize he's been fighting for. After 81 grueling days, the metal slime finally dropped its stone. A triumphant roar echoes across the entire city. He scrambles back inside, his mind racing with possibilities. He practically flies back inside, chanting the word finally. At his desk, he catches his breath. The reality of his success sinking in. He stares at the small, dark stone that cost him months of his life. His mind immediately jumps to the 100 million yen he's earned. He celebrates, lost in a fantasy of wealth and a better future. But as the initial euphoria fades, he takes a much closer look. He questions if this is even a real magic stone. It's not very sparkly. It feels more like a lump of iron, prompting a very specific internet search. The top result is a thorough dungeon capture guide. Looks promising. He reads about black dungeons, the opposite of the healing white dungeons. The guide explains the simple reason for this. They're just not popular. These dungeons drop magic ore, not the valuable magic stones. The ore supposedly enhances physical abilities, but the effects are negligible. The effort required far outweighs the reward, making the ore virtually worthless. His 100 million yen dream is unceremoniously tossed into a drawer. He collapses onto his bed, the weight of his failure crushing him. He realizes the hole in his yard was a worthless black dungeon all along. All that time, all that money, all that effort, completely wasted. His mind drifts back, recalling a conversation about the future. And now, with only 2 months left until his final year, he's no closer to an answer. Yuma wakes up, crushed by the weight of his failure. He tells himself that dreams and chances are just fairy tales. His thoughts drift to his friend Rui, who has a clear path forward. The comparison sends a jolt of panic right through him. He tries to shake it off, insisting Rui's life has nothing to do with his. He resolves to move forward, but at his own pace. As a new day dawns, he decides to forget the entire ordeal. But of course, his peaceful morning is shattered by a loud crash. He finds Mizu barking frantically at something outside. Yuma yawns, certain he'd already filled in the hole for good. He finds the crater has been replaced by a massive stone dome. Yuma can only stare, completely unable to comprehend the sight. He climbs atop the strange new structure, finding the original hole. And of course, the slime has respawned, waiting for its daily beating. He complains to Mizu, completely done with this pointless routine. Deciding it's not worth the effort, he scoops up his dog to head inside. But back on the couch, Mizu begins to tremble uncontrollably. His mother appears, scolding him for all the commotion. And so he's dragged back into the same miserable cycle. He's reached his breaking point, screaming that he's had enough. He collapses, consumed by regret and exhaustion. He glares at the worthless ore, tears of frustration in his eyes. This dull black rock is all he has to show for his efforts. But then, a new thought cuts through his despair. A quick search reveals a tutorial on how to consume magic stones. But there's a catch. You need a certain mana index to absorb the power. To use magic, one needs mana, which grows by defeating monsters. A sudden realization hits him. He's been killing a monster every day. He quickly looks up where to buy a device to measure his mana. And he finds the next best thing in his house, a hairdryer. Close enough. He's spent a painful 10,000 yen on a used mana meter. He's ready to finally witness the power of the rare metal slime's ore. He aims the device, ready for a reading that will change his life. But the meter just sputters, giving him absolutely nothing. The room falls silent, his hopes deflating with every passing second. Which leads him to the only logical next step, the store's support counter. He explains to the clerk that the expensive device he just bought is broken. The employee apologizes, taking the meter to run some diagnostics. But 5 minutes later, the clerk returns with a simple verdict. It's not broken. He demonstrates on real magic stones, which register indexes of 1, 2, and 3. The clerk then turns the device on Yuma himself. The meter flashes a definitive soul-crushing 00. The employee asks what exactly Yuma was trying to measure. Yuma admits it was a magic ore, but the clerk isn't surprised. But Yuma argues that his own mana also registered as 0. He proudly declares he's killed over 100 powerful slimes. The clerk gently informs him that he might be misunderstanding everything. He explains that killing weak monsters yields no mana growth at all. Yuma's entire world seems to fade into a blank, empty sky. He sits defeated, mourning the 10,000 yen he'll never get back. He sits alone in a park, utterly defeated by his 0 mana reality. A horrifying thought occurs. Eating the ore would have just been unpleasant. He lets out a scream of pure, unadulterated frustration. Back home, he finds a random flyer he'd almost thrown away. It's an ad for a local dungeon, offering free mana index readings. And just like that, a tiny spark of hope reignites in his eyes. He knows exactly where he needs to go. Yuma arrives at the massive dome of the blue dungeon. He pays the small entrance fee, his goal just a few steps away. He finds it, the official mana measuring room. He stands before the official equipment, ready for the truth. He waits anxiously, certain this will be different from his hairdryer experiment. He tells himself all his effort and money couldn't have been for nothing, but the official results sheet tells a very different, very disappointing story. He stares at the page, unable to process the string of zeros. The staff member confirms the devastating news with a polite smile. He assures Yuma the machine is incredibly precise, there's no room for error. Yuma can only stand in stunned silence, his last hope completely shattered. After he leaves, the staff members offer some top-tier customer support. One remarks that killing weak slimes from this dungeon yields no growth at all. But the staff member's professional calm suddenly shatters. Behind him, the mana measuring machine begins to malfunction. It spits out an endless, chaotic stream of blank paper. The employees can only stare, completely baffled by the sight. They panic. Apparently 0 was not a valid input for their expensive machine. But Yuma is already gone, clutching the proof of his failure. He stares at the page, a monument to his wasted time and effort. Months of his life, all for a column of perfect mocking zeros. The dream he'd clung to for so long finally dies. But as he leaves, he remembers where he is, a real dungeon. Since he's already here, he might as well take a look around. A staff member cheerfully directs visitors to the dungeon's entrance. Yuma scoffs, thinking it's just a bigger version of his backyard hole. But the sight that greets him leaves him completely speechless. A colossal chasm opens up before him, plunging deep into the earth. He stands at the edge, stunned by the sheer scale of a real dungeon. A staff member approaches, asking if this is his first time visiting. She checks his pass, assuring him the first floor is perfectly safe. Then she smiles and asks if he brought a weapon to fight monsters, a question Yuma had, of course, never even considered. He admits he has nothing, his mind flashing back to the weapon shop. The staff member smiles, directing him to the dungeon's weapon rental service. She explains he can borrow one for free as long as he returns it. But first, the thrilling adventure of filling out rental forms. Faced with an arsenal of weapons, Yuma picks what he knows best: a hammer. He begins the long descent, already regretting not taking the elevator. The path winds down into the darkness of the massive chasm. He finally reaches the bottom, arriving at the entrance to the first floor. He stands before the doors, completely oblivious to the dangers within. The doors slide open, and Yuma's first real dungeon crawl is about to begin. He can only whisper a single astonished word. The world inside the dungeon is vast and ancient. Towering ruins stretch towards a distant, unseen ceiling. He notes that even this deep, a strange light fills the air. It's not the oppressive darkness he was expecting. The reason, he soon discovers, is the crowd of tourists. And just like that, the magic is completely gone. He realizes he's the only one here completely alone. He watches as families hunt for monsters like a weekend activity. A nearby adventurer wants to try his luck at a kill. He wonders how any monsters could possibly survive in this crowd. But then, a small, wobbly creature appears in his path. Yuma crouches down, recognizing it as a common garden-variety slime. It just sits there, completely harmless and impossibly slow. He can't help but compare it to the lightning-fast monster in his yard. With a sigh, he raises the hammer, ready to do what he came for. He brings the weapon down on the completely oblivious creature, and with a single effortless swing, the slime is obliterated. Yuma is stunned. The monster in his yard is 100 times stronger. And suddenly, the staff's words about weak monsters make perfect sense. He slumps over, the full weight of his failure crashing down on him. And just to add insult to injury, there's no magic stone. He stares at the spot. Another kill with absolutely no reward. He's taken out 6 more, but the drop rate is still a perfect 0. But nearby, a young boy celebrates finding a blue magic stone. His father congratulates him on finding a tiny aquamarine, a stone that's apparently worth a whopping 2,000 yen. But the kid doesn't care about money, he just wants to use magic. Yuma watches as the happy family heads for the exit, and a horrifying thought dawns on him. His grand plan was on the level of a child's. He stands there, a picture of pure, unfiltered disappointment. He asks himself if he's really worse than that little kid. All that effort and he still can't use a single drop of magic. Meanwhile, we cut to the International Dungeon Research Organization. A senior researcher calls out to his subordinate, Clark. He asks Clark to deliver a report to a man named Ethan. Another researcher chimes in, admitting he finds Ethan difficult. He explains that this Ethan was the first person to discover mana. He tells Clark to read the report himself before heading off, and Clark is left alone, holding a report that could change everything. Clark's eyes widen as he processes the shocking report. Ethan, however, calmly confirms the data is accurate. He confirms his subordinate's worst fears are true. Mana is leaking from the dungeons onto the surface. Clark realizes the terrifying implications of this discovery. Ethan calmly explains why monsters can't leave dungeons. The surface world simply lacks the mana they need to survive. But if the leak continues, they'll soon be free to roam. The thought of a monster invasion leaves Clark speechless. Ethan, however, tells him not to panic, because that always works. Clark is so stressed he's literally eating the report. A healthy coping mechanism. Ethan calmly explains the mana leak is still slow. For now, only the weakest monsters can survive on the surface. He tells his subordinate to stay calm and think rationally. Clark hesitantly agrees, trying to keep his cool. But Ethan points to a far more disturbing trend in the data. The mana concentration on the lower floors is also rising, which means the deep dungeon monsters will eventually ascend. Clark sees an even bigger problem, but Ethan seems unfazed. And the scene cuts to a spoon tapping a gelatinous dessert. Ethan asks if Clark truly understands the implications. He explains that one day magic will be usable on the surface, a revelation that sends Yuma's soul leaving his body. Again. He sits at his desk, staring at the symbol of his failure. He picks up the small, dark piece of magic ore, the culmination of 81 grueling days of battle. A worthless prize for a boy with 0 magical potential. But a stubborn, almost foolish curiosity begins to take hold. He knows he can't absorb mana if the stone has any. But his research reveals a fascinating loophole. 0 mana stones exist. He realizes even a trace amount of mana would make the ore useless to him. The fastest way to find out is to just eat it. A thought that lingers in his mind. So like any modern genius, he turns to the internet for guidance. His search reveals some very specific and slightly alarming details. He steels himself, ready to accept the consequences of his next move. But a moment of hesitation gives him pause, questioning his own sanity. The full weight of his ridiculous plan finally hits him, but he's come too far to back down now, ready to face any outcome. First things first, he'll need some supplies from the kitchen. He prepares the ore for consumption, because safety first, obviously. He grabs a drink from the fridge, preparing for the inevitable. With a grimace and a thumbs up, he steals his resolve, and down the hatch goes the worthless piece of ore. He quickly washes it down, hoping for the best. He waits for the magic to happen, or for a stomachache. But for a long moment, there is absolutely nothing. He wonders if he really just ate a rock for no reason. And then a sudden violent jolt rips through his body. He realizes with a shock that he actually absorbed the ore. A tiny change, but for Yuma, it's a spark of unimaginable power. He immediately tests his newfound strength, throwing a punch. He throws another, convinced he's become a powerhouse. He even tries out a special move, a high-flying kick. But after all that, he realizes he feels exactly the same. He shrugs it off, figuring he can't use magic outside a dungeon anyway. His train of thought is derailed by a sudden furry ambush. It's just Mizu, who seems to find his owner's training hilarious. But the dog's playful mood suddenly shifts to aggressive barking. Yuma tries to calm him, realizing Mizu only barks like this for one reason. And as a strange pattern appears on his skin, he understands the power he absorbed. He looks down at his hands, which are no longer human. Panic sets in as he scrambles away from himself. The commotion draws his mother's attention from the kitchen. He bolts into his room, slamming the door behind him. In the mirror, a stranger with metallic skin stares back. He realizes with dawning horror that he's turning into metal. This must be the power of the ore he so foolishly consumed. His entire arm is now a dark, hardened shell. So much for a simple stat boost. But magic isn't supposed to work outside a dungeon. A terrifying question grips him. Will he ever turn back? His mind spirals, terrified this metallic form is permanent. A single desperate thought echoes, "Change back." He collapses onto his desk, utterly convinced his life is over. He curses the metal slime, blaming it for this entire mess. Looking at his hand, he sees the same metallic sheen as the monster. But then, an idea cuts through the panic as he spots a familiar tool. He picks up the hammer, ready to conduct a very stupid experiment. With a grimace, he brings the hammer down hard on his own arm. To his shock, he feels nothing. His skin is as hard as the slime's. And if he has the slime's durability, he might also have its weaknesses. He grabs the blowtorch, testing his theory on his own arm. Then he tries the industrial coolant he knows so well. He realizes his new form shares the slime's weaknesses, but as he contemplates this, his skin begins to change back. The transformation reverses and the relief is overwhelming. In fact, he's starting to think this whole ordeal was kind of fun. But as night falls, he wonders if that was his one and only taste of power. The next day arrives, bringing with it a new resolve. He focuses, trying to will his skin to harden on command. And to his absolute shock, the power is his to control. A manic grin spreads across his face. He can do it again. Even with a mana index of 0, the ore has granted him a real power. But after 5 minutes, he realizes the transformation wears off on its own. He immediately tries to summon the metallic shell once more. But this time, absolutely nothing happens. He realizes with disappointment that it's a once-a-day ability. But even with that limit, a new, dangerous dream begins to form. He imagines himself deep in a dungeon, taking on monsters with invincible fists. He sees a future where he's a famous adventurer, just like the streamer he once despised. But of course, he tells himself he's not interested in that life at all. The streamer's voice echoes in his mind, a lesson on dungeon monsters. He explains that deep dungeon creatures wield powerful magic, and the only way to fight a monster's magic is with magic of your own. Yuma connects the dots. His metallic form is a shield against physical blows. But it's also incredibly weak to heat and cold, just like the slime. For the first time, he feels like he might actually be useful for something. But as the days pass, he still has no idea how to use this power. At school, the same old anxieties about his future creep back in. A classic. And in the end, he just gives up and wastes the day away. He's back to his old routine, envying the successful from his couch. He fills out a career survey, deciding to just pick a random university. Because even with a secret power, his daily routine is still the same. He complains about the chore of it all, but still shows up every day. He raises his hammer, ready to get this over with. And with a familiar swing, he takes out the respawned monster. Defeating the metal slime has become his strange morning ritual. And in this monotonous cycle, an entire year has somehow passed. Meanwhile, in the dangerous depths of the Ibaraki Red Dungeon, A group of adventurers flees in terror, screaming for help. A young woman is left behind, paralyzed by fear as danger closes in. A massive armored beast corners her, its shadow swallowing the cavern. The monster unleashes a devastating roar, ready to strike the final blow. But a new figure leaps in, shielding her with nothing but a cloak. He draws a simple blade, his eyes cold and focused on the target. In a blur of impossible speed, he closes the distance to the beast. His weapon strikes true, finding a chink in the monster's armor. He uses his cloak to bind the creature's massive jaw. And with a final decisive thrust, he drives his blade home. The colossal monster collapses, its rampage brought to a sudden end. Her former party members return, asking if she's okay now that the work is done. The mysterious hero explains his fire-resistant cloak saved the day, and he introduces himself as Rui Yamasawa, a third-year high schooler. The scene shifts to the towering skyscrapers of the city, where we find Rui waiting patiently in a corporate office. A man enters the room, apologizing for making him wait. He's Ishikawa, an executive from the LCID Corporation. He formally thanks Rui for saving his employee during the dungeon trial. But the conversation quickly turns to the monster Rui defeated. A report shows the creature's weak points were hit with perfect accuracy. Rui calmly explains he memorized the monster's anatomy beforehand. Of course he did. Ishikawa is impressed, calling Rui a prodigy and agreeing to his terms. He then asks the young adventurer to hold out his hand. As a reward, he presents the magic stone dropped by the salamander, the Ruby of Shugen. He explains that since Rui defeated the beast, the prize is rightfully his. A prize with a mana index of 700 and a market value of 14 million yen. Rui tries to refuse the extravagant gift, but Ishikawa insists it's company policy. He tells Rui to keep the ruby, claiming it will be essential for his future. And as one future is forged in a high-rise office, another is spent complaining about school over a carton of milk. Yuma stands in his living room, completely oblivious to the world of high-stakes dungeon crawling. He's half listening to the news, which is about to cover a dungeon-related story. A report details an incident at an LCID corporate event. A powerful salamander appeared where it shouldn't have, causing chaos. The newscaster explains a woman was saved by a high school student, because of course she was. And suddenly that detail makes Yuma's blood run cold. The hero's face flashes across the screen, his friend, Rui Yamasawa. Yuma's eyes widen in absolute stunned disbelief. He can only whisper the name of the friend he thought he knew. The next day, the story has followed them to school. A full-blown media circus is waiting right outside the gates. Yuma can only watch from the sidelines as Rui is swarmed by reporters. A reporter asks if he was scared, but Rui just smiles coolly. He humbly credits a simple rental weapon for his incredible feat. Then they mention the prize, a stone worth 14 million yen. But Rui has no plans to sell it. He'll use the power for himself. He declares with absolute certainty that he'll become an adventurer. And that single word, future, sends Yuma spiraling once again. A school official praises Rui's grades, his ambition, and his new corporate backing. Yuma turns to Kaidi, completely clueless about the company's name. She explains it's only the biggest dungeon company in Japan, and Rui's dream job. Kaidi explains Rui's next step, a national training academy for adventurers. She's amazed at how little Yuma knows about his own world, but she points out he always acts like he couldn't care less. Then she drops a bombshell he wasn't expecting. She's going to the academy too, right alongside Rui. Her dream is to become a messiah, a rare and powerful healer. Yuma knows that's an even more difficult path than being an adventurer. But she's already been tested by LCID and told she has potential. And just like that, Yuma is left behind in the crowd, alone with the two words that have haunted him for so long, future and dream. Kaidi admits she never saw Rui as just a friend, but as a rival, a memory of a simpler time, when the three of them were inseparable. But now, his friends are running towards their future, leaving him behind. The panic sets in, a storm of questions with no answers. But a spark of defiance cuts through the despair. He has to do something. So he turns to the one thing he can control, his schoolwork. He realizes the first hurdle is his grades, the one thing separating him from them. A noble goal, but the reality of studying is less than inspiring. The textbook seems to fight back with every page he turns, and just like that, his grand academic comeback ends in total defeat. He asks his dog where to find his motivation switch, a solid plan. He admits he has no dreams, no goals, just an empty void. Without a destination, he has no idea which way to even run. His mind flashes to Rui, perfect, popular, and now a famous hero. And then there's Kaidi, trading nursing school for a divine calling. As they sprint towards their futures, Yuma is left standing perfectly still. He thinks of the privileged few, the ones who are chosen for greatness. And watching his friends, he finally understands his own feelings. He's not just jealous of their success, but of their sense of purpose. He just wants something, anything, to be passionate about. He resolves to stick to the one thing he knows, his daily routine. And in that time, he's managed to farm 2 more magic ores. He consumed them both, extending his metallic form to 15 minutes. But the power-up means nothing if the enemy never changes. Until today, when something inside the tunnel is different. A new creature emerges, shining with a brilliant golden light. He can't believe his eyes. It's a golden metal slime, and just like its predecessor, it moves with impossible speed. He tries his usual tactic, but the coolant seems far less effective. He realizes this isn't the same old fight. This is something new. He falls back on his classic, highly scientific strategy, fire and ice. With a renewed sense of purpose, he vows to take this new monster down. And after a grueling battle, Yuma emerges victorious once again, though his victory comes at the cost of his dwindling supplies. But this time, something is left behind in the dust. He cautiously approaches, not daring to believe his luck has changed. He holds it in his hand, a golden magic ore. But his research turns up nothing. The item is completely unknown. His homemade manometer confirms it has an index of 0, just like the others. But then, a far more practical and profitable idea comes to mind. He calls a precious metals shop, hoping to get his new prize appraised. But the shop needs proof of purity or purchase, things monster drops don't have. And to top it all off, he's a miner, so he can't sell it anyway. So much for that plan. With no other choice, Yuma decides to just use the ore himself. He's torn between excitement and the very real fear of turning into a golden statue. He focuses his will, commanding his body to harden and absorb the power. And to his surprise, his skin takes on a brilliant golden sheen. But as night falls, he realizes this new form feels exactly like the old one. The next day, his daily battle yields the same old, worthless black ore. And the day after that, the monotonous cycle continues without change. And the next day, another black ore appears in the dust. The day after that, the same thing happens again. And again, like clockwork, a new ore materializes. Yuma finally realizes something is very, very wrong. For over a year, he got 3 ores. Now he's gotten one every day for 5 days straight. He can only think of one explanation. The golden ore he consumed. It must have a hidden effect, one that guarantees a 100% drop rate. To test his theory, he heads back to the blue dungeon. Time for some real science. But he returns home later that day, his shoulders slumped in defeat. The regular slimes dropped nothing, forcing him to accept a crushing new reality. The daily grind continues, and his collection of worthless ores grows. He was lamenting his strange new life when something changed. Yuma stares into the tunnel, completely caught off guard, because after the golden slime, a new challenger has appeared, a crimson slime. It immediately slams into him with unexpected force. This new monster is far more aggressive than the others. It practically taunts him, ready for a real fight. And Yuma is just about done with his backyard's Monster of the Week program. But then a realization dawns. This is the purpose of his power. He activates his metallic form, ready to finally put it to the test. The slime's attack bounces harmlessly off his metallic skin. So he falls back on his tried-and-true method, the blowtorch. He unleashes a torrent of flame, ready to end this quickly. But the crimson slime is completely immune to the heat. Stumped, Yuma turns to the internet for a new weakness. His search reveals a way to make metal brittle, rust. And so begins a very serious, very scientific preparation montage. His new plan, freeze the slime, then give it an acid bath. With the monster now covered in rust, he applies the final touch. And with that, another bizarre backyard battle comes to an end. The next day, a new challenger appears, a metal blue slime. But this one is immune to the cold, rendering his usual strategy useless. So he devises a new, slightly more flammable strategy, and after a fiery battle, he emerges victorious once again. But the next day brings a silver slime, continuing the trend. This one, however, is immune to both fire and cold. The day after, a new golden slime appears, crackling with energy. But this one falls to his usual non-elemental tactics. And just like that, he's collected 4 new, colorful ores. He sits at his desk, wondering what this daily slime festival is all about. He realizes the golden ore must have caused the 100% drop rate. So with no other options, he decides to eat the new ores too. Down the hatch it goes. Because what's one more questionable life choice? He checks his body, ready to see what new power he's unlocked. He flexes, feeling a surge of strength, but nothing seems different. Until a strange, dark liquid begins to ooze from his very skin. The substance hardens and spreads, forming a shell around him. He's suddenly encased in a sleek, demonic-looking armor. He stares at his reflection, barely recognizing the horned figure looking back. The panic sets in as he realizes this isn't just armor, he's actually grown horns. He realizes this is far more intense than his previous transformations. Yuma stares at his armored hands, completely baffled by the upgrade. He tries to calm himself down, insisting it's fine since he can change back. With no other options, he turns to the internet to research the ore's effects. His search reveals that white dungeons produce stones with healing magic. Yellow dungeons are the source of lightning magic and yellow stones. Red dungeons, as one might guess, grant the power of fire. Green dungeons are tied to wind magic and their corresponding stones. And blue dungeons are where adventurers find the power of water. Finally, black dungeons produce ore that enhances physical abilities. He connects the dots. The colored ores must share the properties of their dungeons. But he still feels completely incapable of using any actual magic. So he turns to his old, reliable scientific instruments. He summons a small flame ready to test his new theory. And to his absolute shock, the fire doesn't burn him at all. He tries the coolant next and feels absolutely nothing. The pieces fall into place. Red for fire, blue for water, and so on. He realizes he's just gained resistance to all 4 major elements. A slow, dawning realization. This is an incredible ability, but even with this power, he still has no dreams or purpose. He's relieved the transformation isn't permanent, reverting after 5 minutes. He runs through the elemental colors he's already encountered. He wonders what a white slime, the logical next step, would even grant him. For the first time, he feels a genuine spark of excitement for the future. The next day, he stands before the crater, ready for his new opponent. But it's not a white slime, it's just a plain, boring black one. Meanwhile, 2 weeks later at the IDR, a display case holds a collection of rare stones. A researcher mentions the recent subjugation of a powerful Duke monster. This is only the 3rd such creature to be defeated in the last 3 years. And the most curious detail is the prize it dropped, a shattered black ore. The researcher explains that defeating a Duke-class monster is a major event. He lists the few countries known to have black dungeons, adding that Japan's is likely unexplored. A senior researcher scoffs at the idea of anyone exploring a worthless black dungeon. He dismisses the explorer as some kind of eccentric fool. And back in the present, that very same fool is having a very bad day. Because his backyard has spawned a new, much bigger problem. The new slime is so massive it can't even fit through the tunnel entrance. A quick size comparison shows this new beast is 5 times larger than his usual target. He questions if he can even defeat it, but then a familiar thought takes hold. A bigger monster must mean a bigger, rarer, and far more valuable prize. He gathers his supplies, ready to give this new monster a very cold welcome. But he reminds himself he has his own power now, his enhanced metallic form. He activates the armor, not even bothering to change out of his tracksuit. He leaps into the crater, but the ground itself erupts with metallic spikes. The sudden assault sends him reeling, completely caught off guard. He's forced back, realizing this new opponent plays by different rules. The giant slime extends its body into razor-sharp, blade-like tendrils. It lunges forward with impossible speed, ready to slice him in two. Yuma raises his armored arm, bracing for the devastating impact, but the blade shatters against his skin. His own armor is even stronger. The giant slime isn't just bigger, it's armed to the teeth. It unleashes a powerful shockwave, sending Yuma flying. He tries to call a timeout, but the monster isn't listening. The creature morphs again, this time into a massive spiked ball. It launches itself forward, a spinning projectile of certain doom. The attack connects, shredding his tracksuit to pieces. He's unharmed, but his favorite loungewear is a casualty of war, and so the battle rages on in his tiny backyard arena. 30 minutes pass, and the fight shows no signs of stopping. An hour goes by, a testament to their equally stubborn power. Yuma is completely gassed, asking the giant slime if it could please just give up already. He admits that even though the attacks don't hurt, they're still incredibly annoying. And to make matters worse, he's completely out of coolant and fuel for his torch. With no other options, he falls back on the one thing he has left. His trusty hammer, a 1280 yen tool that's become an extension of his own body. His frustration finally boils over into pure, unadulterated rage. He screams at the monster, demanding that it just break already. And with one final desperate swing, he shatters the giant slime into pieces. A new ornate magic ore falls from the dust, a prize unlike any he's seen before. But Yuma is too exhausted to celebrate, collapsing in his ruined backyard. His mother finds him in his tattered clothes, demanding an explanation for the chaos. He holds the new ore in his hand, a unique prize with an intricate pattern. Back at his desk, he observes it's like a normal ore, but with a strange floral design. He pulls out his mana meter, certain that defeating a boss monster must have raised his own power. But the meter gives him the same old soul-crushing 00. He tries it on the ore itself, but the result is exactly the same. He sighs, realizing if it had mana, he could sell it. But as it is, it's useless to him. But his curiosity wins out, and he decides to do the only logical thing: eat it. And with a swig of his drink, down goes another questionable life choice. A familiar warmth spreads through his body as he absorbs its power. He clutches his chest as a new power surges through him. This time the sensation is an intense, unbearable heat. But as the burning fades, he realizes his old wounds are healing. He wonders if this new ore will change his armored form. With renewed excitement, he prepares to test his power. But he immediately realizes he's about to ruin another shirt. The familiar dark liquid erupts from his skin once more. But this time it spreads with a new, violent intensity. The substance hardens into a far more complex, menacing armor. Yuma stares in shock at his terrifying new form. He strikes a pose, feeling like a villain from a kid's show. He's even taller in this form, his perspective completely shifted. A form this intimidating must have other abilities, right? He recalls the giant slime's bladed tendrils, and with a thought, his arm morphs into a massive sword. He tries again, this time forming a colossal battle axe. He's a living weapon, limited only by his imagination. He proudly shows off to Mizu, who seems thoroughly unimpressed. But their moment is interrupted by a familiar black ooze. As Mizu gives chase, Yuma realizes the slime is a part of him. He sees his reflection, realizing he looks like a monster, but decides to ignore it for now. But while he was fighting his backyard pest, a global crisis was brewing. At the IDR, the world's top researchers have gathered for an emergency meeting. The topic of discussion is a series of recent, unprecedented events. For 4 consecutive days, the prophetic Orpheus slab has been showing strange anomalies. A woman named Maya Berger explains that 4 powerful Lord monsters have been defeated in a row. An American physicist, James Bright, suspects a nation is hiding a massive exploration. A Chinese biologist, Li Haoran, wonders if his own country is involved. An Egyptian scholar points out the attacks were coordinated across 4 different colored dungeons. And just like that, the international blame game officially begins. Ethan Noble raises a hand, silencing the international bickering. He explains that clearing 4 deep dungeons at once is a logistical impossibility. He reminds them of a past battle where even the world's strongest barely survived a single lord. Another researcher points to the slab, demanding to know why the prophetic ores are shattering. But Ethan simply suggests their entire foundation of knowledge might be wrong. The American physicist, James Bright, questions this radical new idea. Ethan explains their long-held belief that a dungeon's color corresponds to the monsters inside. But the recent events have shattered that assumption completely. He then directs their attention to the black ore that broke 2 weeks prior. A senior researcher scoffs, certain no one would be allowed to explore such a place. Little does he know. But Ethan clarifies this only applies to known managed dungeons. Maya Berger argues that any explorer that powerful would be under strict government control. Ethan lays out his theory. An unknown adventurer emerged from a new black dungeon. And back home, Yuma wonders if this mystery hero is one of the world's strongest. Oh, the irony. The senior researcher dismisses the entire notion as completely absurd. But their debate is cut short by an urgent interruption. Ethan seems completely unfazed, almost amused by the sudden chaos. A smug smile spreads across his face. His wild theory might just be right. The urgent news arrives. The Black King's ore on the slab has shattered. And the Black King's vanquisher complains to his dog that the fight was way too tough. Yuma wakes up, still feeling the effects of yesterday's brutal fight. He remembers using up every last drop of his supplies to take the giant slime down. Now he has nothing left to fight today's monster, whatever it may be. But his loyal dog Mizu seems unusually cheerful this morning. He greets his energetic companion, who happily bounces around his feet. He notes that for over a year, Mizu has been his personal slime alarm. But today, for the first time, the dog is completely silent. He follows Mizu to the usual spot, a sense of unease growing. He looks around, completely bewildered by the sudden change. And then he sees it. The crater. The tunnel. It's completely gone. He realizes the giant slime must have been the dungeon's final boss, but he can't understand why the hole would just vanish after all this time. Still, a part of him is relieved. No more early mornings, no more danger for Mizu. He tries to convince himself that he's happy, that he's glad it's all over. His morning routine is suddenly quiet, almost unnervingly so. He eats his breakfast, the silence of a normal life settling in. For the first time in over a year, his world is completely, utterly ordinary. He walks to school, listing the perks of his newfound freedom. No more ruined clothes, no more wasted money on supplies, and no more chasing a dream that was never going to pay off anyway. He realizes all his effort will never be recognized by anyone. He once found it a chore, but now he's left with a strange emptiness. A cheerful greeting suddenly breaks him out of his thoughts. It's Kaidi, who's surprised to see him at school so early. She teases him about being late yesterday, asking if he's sleep-deprived. But she admits she's not worried since he's been an early riser lately. He can't exactly tell her he was busy fighting a giant slime. He plays it off, but she doesn't seem to buy his flimsy excuse. He resolves that he'll never be late because of a dungeon again. Yuma tells himself that part of his life is officially over. But Kaidi can only stare, sensing something is off with him. Back home, he tries to focus on his future, but finds only emptiness. He leans back, completely disconnected from the path laid out for him. Just fill out the forms, get into a decent college, and wait for a normal life. But a single nagging question cuts through the apathy. Is this really it? He admits to himself he has no dreams, no passion, just a pathetic act. But even in his despair, a thought begins to surface. He picks up his phone, a flicker of the old obsession returning. His search history tells the real story of the past year. A story that began in a tiny, impossible dungeon in his own backyard. He remembers the year he spent fighting every single day. His reasons may have been selfish, but the effort was real. It was a world he never thought he'd be a part of. And now he's finally ready to reach for that dream. For the first time, he says the words out loud. He wants to be an adventurer. He looks up the same training academy his friends are attending. A prestigious institution, only a few years old. It boasts being the first to successfully capture a live monster. Great for the brochure. A place dedicated to every aspect of dungeon research. Yuma sits back. A new, impossible goal now set before him. He reads the academy's requirements. A grueling 6-month course with no room for failure. This reminds him of a school assignment to list his own strengths. So he begins to write, starting with his first power, metallization. He adds his elemental resistances, a defensive ability that's practically unmatched. And then there's his second power, the ability to morph his body into any weapon. He closes his eyes, focusing on the strange new power that resides within him. The familiar black substance erupts, hardening into his demonic armor. But this time he imagines something different, a more fluid form. And from his own body, he manifests a small, gelatinous companion. He realizes this new ability could be incredibly useful for exploring dungeons. But a horrifying thought cuts through his ambition. His power is a dead giveaway. It's undeniable proof he's been illegally exploring a black dungeon. A quick search reveals just how much trouble he's actually in. He vows to keep his abilities an absolute secret from now on. But secrecy is just one of his problems. His mana is still 0. And then there's the third, and by far the biggest hurdle. To be a pro, you need a license and corporate backing. Lone wolves aren't allowed in the deep dungeons. It's a team sport, apparently. His only options are a dungeon company or a training academy. A path he realizes he should have started on a long time ago. He remembers a conversation with Kaidi about her own entrance exams. She'd mentioned her test date was still a long way off. A sudden thought sends him scrambling for his phone. He realizes with a jolt that the academy's application period is still open. The next day at school, he has a brand new mission. Kaidi stands in the hallway, a thoughtful expression on her face, and right on cue, Yuma peeks out from a classroom, beckoning her over. She finds it strange, noting he never seeks her out like this. Yuma nervously admits that he has a favor to ask of her. Kaidi can only stare, completely surprised by his sudden request. Yuma struggles to find the words, his pride fighting every syllable. He finally bows his head, begging Kaidi to help him study. She's stunned. In 18 years, he's never asked for academic help. She asks what caused this sudden change, thinking he'd settled on college. But Yuma's mind is a chaotic mess of dungeon exams and deadlines. Kaidi gets serious, reminding him her dream isn't a joke. He looks up, his eyes burning with a newfound desperate resolve. She looks down, wondering if he thinks it's already too late. But she tells him that it's never too late to start trying. And with an outstretched hand, she agrees to help him. Kaidi lays out the first condition. Their time is incredibly limited. She explains the practical exam is weighted more heavily than the written one. So if he gives it his all, his chances aren't exactly 0. She asks him one last time if he's truly ready for this. Yuma accepts the challenge. bracing himself for her Spartan training methods. And so begins a grueling montage of late nights and endless studying. The day of the exam finally arrives at the Seeker Training Institute. Kaidi points him to his testing building, wishing him luck before they part ways. She teases him one last time, telling him not to give up. He tells her to get lost. How sweet. Inside, Yuma sits among the other hopefuls as the exam officially begins. The written exam is over, and Yuma feels surprisingly confident. But he knows the real test is next. The practical exam and mana measurement. He couldn't find any info on it, so he's going in completely blind. A solid strategy. A fellow applicant explains the test. They'll fight monsters to check their mana growth rate. The monsters are red slimes, chosen specifically for their mana-boosting properties. Yuma is surprised by her knowledge, but she's just happy to find someone her age. She introduces herself as Kagurazaka, and Yuma is relieved to meet a peer. She offers to teach him a few things while they wait, a self-proclaimed mana otaku. An instructor announces that anyone with a mana index of 0 should proceed to the next room. Kagurazaka reassures him, saying it's perfectly fine to start from nothing. Kagurazaka explains it's not about your starting mana, but your potential for growth. She continues, detailing how an adventurer's entire career is built on their mana pool. She introduces the concept of a mana growth rate, a stat unique to each person. And then there's the mana limit, a hard cap on how powerful one can become. The lecture ends as an instructor hands them a knife for the practical test. Their task is simple. Poke the jelly, then get their mana remeasured. Easy enough? Yuma finally understands. This single kill will determine his future potential, but the old anxiety creeps back in as he worries about getting another 0. Kagurazaka reassures him, explaining that growth and limits are two different things. Yuma is left to ponder this. Everyone's aptitude is different, and his is about to be revealed. He tells himself that his year of fighting must count for something. He steels his resolve, refusing to let his doubts win. An instructor steps forward to brief the applicants on the practical exam. He warns them that this test carries a very real risk of injury. The test will take place in Japan's only artificial dungeon, a controlled environment built to study monsters and magic. He explains their objective is on the first basement floor. The task is simple. Retrieve a ball and return within the time limit. The applicants murmur, wondering if they're meant to fight or just run. But the instructor clarifies, this is a test of speed, not strength. He clarifies the monsters are weak, but they should still be careful. And with that, the practical exam is officially underway. Kagurazaka seems confident, telling Yuma this will be an easy win. But a sudden violent tremor from inside shatters their confidence. Yuma can only wonder what's happening inside the controlled environment. The instructor introduces the terrifying monster they'll be facing. A small army of red slimes, apparently a truly fearsome sight. But the reality is a literal tidal wave of wobbly red monsters. The instructor gives the signal, and the horde descends on the applicants. The first applicant is immediately swallowed by the gelatinous tide. Another applicant is buried alive under the gelatinous horde. Kagurazaka panics, realizing this is far more than a simple test. After 8.5 minutes, he's finally spit out, completely defeated. The verdict is swift and brutal. He's disqualified from the exam. Kagurazaka barely makes it back, clocking in just under 3 minutes. The tide of red jelly recedes, ready for the next challenger. And now it's Yuma's turn to face the music, or, the jelly. But as he enters, the entire slime horde freezes in unison. A wave of confusion and terror ripples through the wobbly army. They're not just scared, they're utterly petrified of the boy in front of them. And then, the entire horde of slimes parts like the Red Sea. Yuma can only stare, wondering what they're so tense about. Kagurazaka points out that even she was terrified by the horde. The door closes, leaving him alone to face the impossible test. He looks down the long corridor where the slimes are just waiting. He realizes they're all huddled together, completely frozen in place. He cautiously begins to run, wondering if this is some kind of trap. He runs right past them, offering a polite, "Excuse me," on his way. Because manners matter. He grabs the objective, still expecting an ambush at any second. But the slimes still don't move. Seemingly confused by his very presence, he runs back, assuming Kagurazaka must have tired them all out. She clocks his time, a new record of 2 minutes and 28 seconds. She congratulates him, but Yuma just calls it luck, thanking her for going first. With the exam over, they part ways, hoping to meet again as students. After the test, Yuma pulls out his phone to check his messages. It's Kaidi, who's still busy with her own exam, asking how he did. He's done everything he possibly could. Now all that's left is to wait. An entire week passes in agonizing silence. The results finally arrive, and Yuma holds his entire future in his hands. And with a triumphant roar, he and Mizu celebrate his victory. He passed. But his celebration is immediately cut short by his mother, who is not a fan of the noise. And with his victory comes a new, far more terrifying challenge, telling his parents. He approaches his mother, who tells him to act his age, assuming he's college-bound. He tells her he needs to talk to both of them when his father gets home. His mother's expression shifts, realizing this isn't just a casual chat. That night, the stage is set for a conversation that will change everything. He lays it all out. He's dropping his college plans to become an adventurer. And just like that, the bombshell is dropped, leaving his parents completely stunned. His mother's mind reels, unable to reconcile this ambitious stranger with her lazy son. She questions his sudden change of heart, pointing out he's never mentioned this before. He then drops the other shoe. He's already taken the exam and passed. He explains that while tuition is free, it's a boarding school with its own expenses. The program is a brutal 6-month course with constant exams and a high dropout rate. He apologizes for not consulting them, knowing he should have, but he insists this is a serious goal, one he wanted to prove he could achieve first. His father finally speaks, questioning the safety and stability of such a dangerous job. He asks if Yuma is truly prepared to risk his life for this new dream. Yuma's mind flashes back to his own backyard battles, a world far from safe. He admits he knows the risks, but he's finally found something worth fighting for. His father pushes back, asking why he can't just take the safe route through college. He admits he only chose college because he had no other passion. His mother is stunned, realizing she's never seen him this determined. Yuma worries his father will just dismiss his dream as childish, but he stands firm, declaring that this is who he is now. His father admits he's surprised, realizing he never asked about Yuma's true feelings. He asks if this is something Yuma has always been interested in. Yuma is taken aback, relieved that his father is finally listening. And with a simple nod, his father gives him his blessing to try. But he offers a compromise. Take a leave of absence from college, don't drop out. If the academy works out, then he can leave college for good. A classic dad-approved safety net. Yuma is completely floored by his father's unexpected support. He thanks them, promising to give this new dream his all. His parents watch him go, surprised by this sudden change in their son. His father knows that once a path is chosen, you can only cheer from the sidelines. And so, on April 1st, Yuma arrives for his first day at the academy. He's joined by his friends, Rui and Kaidi, all in their new uniforms. Kaidi is surprised by his sudden ambition, but Rui seems to have expected it. She's just happy the three of them are finally back together again. Rui agrees, a gentle smile gracing his features. For the first time, Yuma feels like he's finally standing on equal ground. He's determined to finally stand shoulder to shoulder with his friends. But his first day brings a harsh dose of reality: class placements. The academy itself is an imposing fortress, a place for the elite. And of course, Rui and Kaidi are placed in Class 1, the top of the class. Yuma, however, finds himself all alone in the crowd for Class 3. The realization hits him like a truck. If they're in Class 1, he must be at the bottom. A fellow student confirms his fears. Class 3 is for the dropouts. He's joined by Ashia, a 30-year-old, and Hamanaka, a 23-year-old. Apparently, high school never ends for some people. At 18, Yuma is the youngest of the group, a fact his new classmates find amusing. Ashia declares them the official dropout squad, ready to face failure together. Yuma wonders what truly separates him from his friends. He realizes they were working hard while he just complained. The class gossip reveals Class 1 has 2 record-breaking students. One is Kagurazaka, the heiress to a massive corporation. The other is a high schooler scouted by the powerful El Cid, a name Yuma knows all too well, his friend Rui Amasawa. This means Rui isn't just talented, he's a true prodigy. But the gossip isn't done. Class 3 has its own legend, a student who somehow managed a mana growth rate of 0, and Yuma realizes he's the class's other record breaker. He stares at his results, a single glaring number, a mana growth rate of 0. He remembers Kagurazaka's words, how easy it was supposed to be. His new classmate puts 2 and 2 together. Yuma is the infamous Mana 0. The news spreads through the class as they snatch the paper for a closer look. His new friends wonder how he even passed, but Yuma insists his other scores were solid. He can't believe it. After everything he's been through, his mana is still nothing. But Ashia snaps him out of his despair with a friendly slap to the back. They show him their own stats, which are so low they're practically 0 anyway. Yuma realizes he has absolutely no talent for growing stronger in the traditional sense. But Ashia offers a new theory. Maybe his growth is slow, but his potential is limitless. Ashia tells him not to worry about a slow start. It's all about how you finish the race, a thought that floors Yuma. And just like that, the dropout squad is born, ready to prove everyone wrong. From that day forward, the three of them gave it their absolute all. Their days were spent in combat training against hordes of slimes. Their nights were filled with studying dungeon laws and regulations. Fun stuff. Even on their days off, they hunted monsters in the blue dungeon. Their dedication catches the eye of a staff member. He grants them access to the artificial dungeon for extra training. But Yuma knows his stats are the worst. He has to work even harder. He clings to the hope that he's just a late bloomer, vowing to make his mana grow. But as the rainy weeks turn into a month, the academy feels less like a school and more like a prison. After a month of grueling training, the dropout squad's new mana scores are deeply unimpressive. Yuma's is still a perfect 0, forcing him to wonder if he has any talent whatsoever. And Ashia delivers the final blow. If they don't hit a mana index of 50 by midterms, they're expelled. The pressure is already crushing his friends, but Yuma insists they still have time to turn things around. But it's not just them. The entire class is slowly drowning in a sea of despair. Meanwhile, in another world entirely, Rui understands that talent and effort are both required to survive. Yuma is jolted from his thoughts by a sudden buzz from his pocket. It's a message from Kaidi, a small, cheerful check-in from a world away. He replies with a flurry of encouraging stickers, a small moment of connection. He promises to do his best, a digital show of bravado. But he knows the gap between them is vast, a chasm of talent and time. He vows to pass the midterms and graduate alongside his friends no matter what. Meanwhile, back at the IDR, the mystery of the Black King continues. Clark reports that their global search for the Black King has turned up nothing. The Orpheus slab remains a puzzle, its prophecies still largely a mystery. But Ethan's faith in the slab is absolute. He knows the king was defeated. Clark then brings up a new request, a report on artificial dungeons, a topic that seems to deeply annoy the world's leading dungeon expert. Clark reports a disturbing trend of accidents in artificial dungeons worldwide. But Ethan just smiles, amused by their foolish meddling. He's always been against these artificial constructs and the research within. To him, dungeons are still a mystery, and replicating them is pure hubris. He warns that overconfidence in science will lead to a painful lesson. 2 months pass, and June arrives at the Seeker Training Institute. Today's agenda is a joint class mock dungeon exploration. Kaidi explains to Yuma and Rui that they're heading to the 3rd floor. Only 15 students were chosen from Class 1, and naturally, Rui was one of them. Kagurazaka adds that 2 Messiah candidates will be protected by the others. So it's an escort mission. Kaidi explains the mission. Navigate to the 3rd floor and retrieve a magic stone. Yuma's attention is drawn to the ornate sword in Rui's hand. Rui explains it's a magic armament, a weapon infused with a magic stone. The word magic hangs in the air, a painful reminder of what Yuma lacks. He asks Rui about the Ruby of Shugen, the one he earned in high school. Rui confirms he absorbed it and plans to test his new power today. Of course he does. A treasure with a mana index of 700, worth a staggering 14 million yen. Yuma realizes Rui's own mana must be over 700 to even use it. Rui just smiles, waving goodbye as he heads off to the training. And Yuma is left behind, the gap between them growing wider by the second. Deep beneath the academy, on the 5th floor of the artificial dungeon, lies the research area. Here, scientists note that the students' training exercise is about to begin on the floors above. One researcher asks if the sounds and vibrations from the training can be felt even this far down. His superior complains that the commotion is agitating their most troublesome specimen. They observe 2 colossal centipede monsters, which have thankfully calmed down for now. The lead researcher is confident the reinforced glass will hold no matter what. Famous last words. But he clarifies that these giant bugs aren't the real problem. The true source of their concern is a massive stone-like egg hooked up to a dozen monitors. A faint pulsation has been detected. It's confirmed to be a living monster's egg. But if it hatches, they have no idea what kind of creature will emerge. The researcher dismisses the egg as harmless, found on a relatively shallow floor. He's confident it's contained, just as its heartbeat suddenly goes into overdrive. The 2 men can only watch in confusion as the monitor shows a frantic, violent pulse. And in a flash of violence, their reflections are shattered by a brutal, bloody attack. All that's left is a gruesome scene, a testament to their fatal miscalculation. Elsewhere in the academy's monitor room, an instructor briefs an audience on the training. He reminds them that survival is the true goal of any dungeon exploration. He warns the other students that this is a lesson in the harsh reality of failure. A real morale booster. but his speech is cut short by a sudden, violent tremor from the dungeon itself. Deep inside, Rui unleashes his new power, his blade wreathed in crimson flame. Kagurazaka unleashes her own power, a whirlwind of energy surrounding her. Yuma watches from the monitor room, a smug look on his face. The other students murmur that Rui and Kagurazaka are on another level entirely. Yuma listens, the reality of their talent sinking in. Even Kaidi admits this training seems almost too easy for Rui. But a sudden violent tremor shakes the entire facility. The students look around in confusion, wondering if it's an alarm. A blaring announcement confirms their fears. An emergency has occurred. Yuma can only wonder what's happening, his confidence completely gone. An instructor orders an immediate evacuation, his voice strained with panic. Yuma wonders if his friends can even hear the alarm down there. On screen, Rui and Kagurazaka are clearly just as confused as everyone else. Deep inside the dungeon, Kaidi stands with the elite team. She looks back, a sense of unease settling over the group. Suddenly, the very ground beneath her feet begins to shatter. A hand clamps over her mouth, silencing any cry for help. She stands amidst the rubble, her eyes vacant and her will gone. Yuma watches the monitor, his focus locked on his friend's peril. Without a second thought, he bolts from his seat, running for the dungeon. His classmates can only call after him, telling him to come back. For a split second, he sees her face as she plummets into the darkness. Yuma can only scream her name, his voice raw with panic. The other students cry out as Kaidi disappears into the chasm below. Rui struggles to keep his composure, forcing himself to think rationally. Kagurazaka realizes the alarm wasn't a drill. Something has gone terribly wrong. Rui immediately takes command, ordering the others to evacuate while he goes down. He insists on going alone, confident he'll be faster without backup. A classic hero move. The other students hesitate, knowing the power gap between them and Rui is immense. But Kagurazaka steps forward, declaring that by that logic, she's going too. The others agree to evacuate and warn security, telling the two of them to be careful. Rui offers his thanks, but Kagurazaka says, saving a classmate is just what they do. And with that, the two prodigies leap into the darkness below. They land amidst the rubble, weapons drawn and ready for a fight. Rui prepares to light the way, but the cavern is eerily quiet. They search the wreckage, but Kaidi is nowhere to be found. Kagurazaka is confused. She should be right where she landed. But then she spots a grim clue on the ground, a trail of blood. They follow it to find Kaidi, standing silently with a knife in hand. Rui knows she couldn't have walked this far on her own. He realizes with dawning horror that something dragged her here. Yuma races towards the dungeon, his mind screaming Kaide's name. But his path is blocked by a chaotic evacuation and a crystalline barrier. He hides, desperately trying to find a way to sneak inside. His stealth mission is immediately interrupted by a shouting instructor. Yuma stammers that he's just worried about a friend trapped inside. The instructor orders him to evacuate, insisting the professionals will handle it. But Yuma knows they won't prioritize Kaidi. He has to go himself. He needs a way to get in unnoticed, a plan that seems impossible. His thoughts are interrupted by a student pushing a large cart. And as he spots the equipment on board, a brilliant, terrible idea is born. He hides between two equipment carts, his mind racing for a way inside. Finding a blind spot, he prepares to use the one power he must keep secret. The familiar black substance erupts, forming his demonic armor. But this time, he commands the armor to do something new. Liquefy. His entire armored form dissolves, pouring into a bag on the cart. With his brilliant, if slightly gooey plan a success, he's ready to move. The cart rolls past security, carrying a hidden passenger with one goal: save Kaidi. But inside, the guards are met with a scene of absolute horror. The entire area has become a slaughterhouse, a testament to a monster's rampage. Yuma arrives to find the instructor, confirming the worst. Everyone is dead and the cages are broken. The instructor confirms the cages are empty, the monsters are gone. But he quickly realizes they haven't gone far at all. A blood-curdling scream echoes through the facility. Another guard is struck down in a flash of violence. The monster's brutal attack leaves no room for survival. And a new, far more intelligent creature emerges from the chaos. It calmly observes its new surroundings, a predator on the loose. Its glowing eyes hold a cold, calculating intelligence. So much for a mindless beast. It even faces down one of the larger escaped monsters. This creature was born in the high-risk lab, and it's living up to the name. The new monster faces down a giant insectoid creature. Meanwhile, the equipment cart Yuma hid in is being moved. An instructor orders the students to take the gear inside. One of them points to the bag Yuma is hiding in. He's told it's full of magic weapons and to take it with them. The students struggle with the bag, complaining about its weight. One of them apologizes for the heavy load. Inside, Yuma realizes he's the reason the bag is so heavy. Whoops. He successfully snuck in, but now he needs to find Kaidi. He overhears that 3 students are trapped on the lower floors. He recognizes the voices. Rui and Kagurazaka went after Kaidi. The students decide to head to the 4th floor to help. They stand ready, a small rescue party of their own. Their faces are grim, carrying the weight of their mission, and Yuma. They arrive on the 4th floor, searching for their fallen classmate. But as the bag unzips, Yuma's cover is about to be blown. He slips out, a tiny blob trying to escape unnoticed. With a quiet plop, he makes a break for freedom. A truly majestic escape. He sees his chance as the students are distracted. One of them senses a monster, but Yuma is already gone. Yuma knows he should leave it to the pros, but he has to save Kaidi himself. The rescue team is met by the intelligent creature, a silent predator in their path. They recognize it as a Soul Mantis, a deep dungeon monster far beyond their pay grade. In a flash of brutal speed, the creature cuts them down without mercy. A dying guard sends out one last warning. A deep dungeon monster is loose on the 4th floor. Elsewhere, Kagurazaka is reaching her breaking point, overwhelmed by the chaos. Rui asks if she's tired, and she immediately tells him to shut it. Ah, teamwork. They stand atop a mountain of defeated monsters, the battle far from over. They've lost count of their kills, but the number is easily over 100. As they run, Kagurazaka complains about the lab's obsession with creepy insect monsters. Kagurazaka notes that their magic is perfect for fighting insects. Rui agrees, saying all that's left is to find Kaidi and get out. But his confidence is shattered by a sudden, terrifying presence. A razor-sharp leg plunges into the ground right beside him. They look up to see a new, far more menacing creature has arrived. A humanoid monster with cold, calculating eyes stares them down. They both recognize the monster from their academy textbooks. It's an Arachnne, a vicious creature from a green dungeon. A monster that can slice through anything and control steel threads. And Rui knows they are completely, utterly outmatched. Rui realizes with dread that Kaidi is somewhere beyond this monster. The Arachnne toys with its threads, a predator in complete control. It unleashes a flurry of attacks, forcing the 2 prodigies back. They can barely defend against the overwhelming speed and power. The monster's web-like attacks shatter their defenses completely. Rui grits his teeth, admitting that there's no way for them to escape. He knows they're completely outmatched and must find another way to Kaidi. The creature stands over them, an apex predator from the deep dungeons. It observes them with a cold, almost casual indifference. And then it speaks, wondering aloud how it got lost in this maze. The Arachnne looks up, annoyed by something sticky on the ceiling. It's Yuma in his slime form, caught helplessly in the monster's web. He dangles from a single thread, right above the deep dungeon predator. The creature begins to reel him in, pulling him down from the rafters. It then proceeds to poke him like a toy, so much for a dramatic entrance. But Yuma has a trick up his sleeve, liquefying to escape the threads. He hangs free, but realizes his clothes are still inside his armor. A quick mental diagram confirms his clothes are part of the transformation. If his armor is destroyed, he's naked. So he turns his entire body into a blade. With a single slice, he cuts the thread and makes his escape. The Arachnne is furious, annoyed that its little toy managed to escape. But Yuma's liquid form quickly reforms into his full demonic armor. A menacing grin spreads across his face. He's going to end this quickly. The deep dungeon monster lets out a furious roar, enraged by his defiance. It lunges forward, unleashing a storm of razor-sharp attacks. Yuma stands his ground, facing the onslaught of steel threads head-on. The threads seem to tear right through him, sending his liquid body flying. The attack is a chaotic blur of slicing and dicing, a real food processor of death. But Yuma stands completely unharmed, his arm now a long, sharp blade. He meets the monster's attack with his own, ready for a real fight. The Arachnne sizes him up, unimpressed by this strange new arrival. But Yuma just grins, finding this deep dungeon threat underwhelming. He unleashes a single, devastating punch that shatters its defenses. And just like that, the mighty Arachnne is reduced to rubble. He scoffs, realizing this monster was no different than a training dummy. But his victory is short-lived. He remembers his real mission is to find Kaidi. He scans the industrial corridors of the artificial dungeon. Every wall seems to hide a new secret or a dead end. The entire structure feels cold and lifeless, a maze of cold steel. He finds a path littered with craters, a sign of a much bigger battle. He follows the trail of destruction to find the intelligent creature. And it's not alone. 2 giant centipedes hold Kaidi captive. She's injured, her uniform stained with blood. Yuma can only whisper her name, his focus locked on his friend. A furious roar echoes through the cavern, demanding they release her. His arm morphs into a massive blade, ready to carve a path to her. But the Soul Mantis meets his charge, its own scythe blocking the way. The centipede holds Kaidi tight, a living shield in this chaotic battle. So much for a fair fight. Yuma ignores the mantis, grabbing the centipede with brute force, and with a single devastating motion, he slams the beast into the ground. The giant centipede is torn apart with a single brutal motion. Yuma stands over the remains, one monster down, one to go. He leaps to Kaida's side, his voice echoing her name. She's barely conscious, wondering if this is the end for her. He holds her, a wave of relief washing over him. She's alive, but his relief turns to panic as he realizes the extent of her injuries. Kaidi remains unconscious, her face etched with pain. He cradles her gently, a silent protector in the surrounding chaos. He complains that she's sleeping soundly, oblivious to his stress. Priorities, I guess. But a familiar voice calls out, promising that everything is okay now. Yuma's mind flashes to a familiar fantasy trope he's read in manga. A classic scene of a grand castle and a sleeping princess. The kind of story where a handsome prince always saves the day. And in this scenario, he's clearly the dashing hero, right? Kaidi slowly regains consciousness, whispering his name. But the face she sees is not the one she was expecting. A terrified scream rips through the cavern. She thinks she's been captured. Yuma is completely baffled, telling her to get a hold of herself. He looks down at his own armored hand, wondering what the problem is. And then he realizes his voice is just a monstrous, distorted growl. He finally gets it. His hero moment is ruined by his monster cosplay. With Kaidi unconscious again, he needs to find a way out of this mess. But his escape is blocked by the second, very angry giant centipede. Yuma can't believe the other monster is still standing after all that. The creature thrashes wildly, caught in an unbreakable grip. Yuma holds it fast, his armored hands digging deep into its tough hide. And with a mighty heave, he sends the beast crashing through the ceiling. At that exact moment, Rui and Kagurazaka finally arrive. They followed the sounds of battle, hoping to find their friend. And they find Kaidi, lying alone in the ruined corridor. Kagurazaka rushes to Kaidi's side, relieved to find she's still alive. Rui scoops her up, declaring that their rescue mission is over. Kagurazaka warns them to stay alert on their way back to the surface. Rui agrees. Another run-in with that Arachnne would be their last. With no weapons left, he entrusts their escape route entirely to Kagurazaka. But the path ahead is a testament to a much bigger, more brutal fight. Elsewhere, Yuma lands hard amidst the rubble, having been thrown through the floor. He looks up, realizing he's been knocked all the way down to the 5th floor. He spots the centipede he threw, now tangled in a giant fan. A fitting end, really. But from the darkness, the intelligent Soul Mantis watches his every move. The creature's grin widens, sensing a new challenge has arrived. It stands as the master of this floor, its centipede guards at the ready. Meanwhile, at the Seeker Training Institute headquarters, an emergency meeting is underway in the principal's office. The principal, a man named Nomura, demands a status report. A nervous staff member begins to lay out the grim details. All monsters from the research lab have escaped onto floors 4 and 5. The professional adventurers sent to contain them have gone completely silent. And to make matters worse, 3 students are now missing inside. The principal realizes this situation is spiraling far out of his control. Principal Nomura knows if students are harmed, he'll have to call in the big guns. His subordinate confirms they've already contacted the police and military. They've also reached out to El Cid, who is sending an elite team of adventurers. The principal then asks for a profile on the escaped monsters. A researcher explains there are 3 highly dangerous specimens to worry about. The first is Adamus, a giant pill bug from the 50th floor of a green dungeon. Its shell is so tough it's been compared to a Patriot missile system. Good luck with that. The staff wonders how anyone could possibly defeat such a creature. But deep in the dungeon, a massive blade pierces that impenetrable shell, and Yuma casually stabs the beast again, looking almost bored by the whole ordeal. He notes the creature's shell was surprisingly soft, an easy kill. With a show of force, he lifts the 2 halves of the monster's corpse, and uses them to smash each other into oblivion, because why not? He stands over the remains, his work here clearly done. 1 giant pill bug, officially subjugated. Back in the meeting, the researcher moves on to the second threat, Persephone. A 3-headed centipede from the 60th floor, even tougher than the last. And when threatened, it spits a powerful, deadly poison. A single drop of this venom is said to be instantly fatal. The only way to fight it is with a team of long-range magic users. Principal Nomura checks his watch, knowing El Cid's team is still hours away. He wonders if the students can even survive that long. Deep below, The three-headed centipede unleashes its deadly venom. The poison splatters across Yuma's armor, who seems more disgusted than hurt. He scolds the monster for its terrible manners and excessive drooling. The creature responds by covering him in even more toxic slobber. So much for diplomacy. Yuma has had enough, grabbing the beast by its multiple heads. With his arms morphed into blades, he ends the fight in a flurry of motion. And just like that, the drooling centipede is officially taken care of. He turns to his next opponent, telling it to prepare for the worst. He turns to the Soul Mantis, declaring it's the only one left standing. The creature's eyes glow, its expression unreadable and utterly calm. Back in the meeting, Principal Nomura asks about the third escaped monster. The researcher reveals its name, Arachnne, the most dangerous specimen they had. A creature so powerful it took down 2 elite adventurers just to be captured. He explains its threads can slice through anything, making it a far greater threat. But of course, that very same monster has already been reduced to a fine paste. The principal slams his fist down, furious they'd bring such a beast to a school. The researcher explains it was a government request to study its ecology. He claims the academy was chosen for its high-level security, a truly flawless plan. The researcher explains they have no jurisdiction over the lab's chain of command. Principal Nomura is clearly not impressed by this bureaucratic excuse. He slumps over his desk, the weight of the situation crushing him. The researcher can only offer a weak apology for the institutional failure. But another staff member interrupts, revealing there's yet another problem. The principal can't believe things could possibly get any worse. He explains the rescue team went silent, just as they sent a final, cryptic message. Their last words confirmed a deep dungeon monster on the 4th floor. A Soul Mantis. A cold sweat breaks out on the principal's face. This is a worst-case scenario. He tries to distance himself, claiming he's just a businessman, not an expert on monsters. The researcher admits he's only ever heard of deep dungeon monsters in theory. Creatures so powerful that conventional weapons are completely useless. He explains the Soul Mantis wasn't captured. It hatched from an egg found in another dungeon. An egg they foolishly brought into a school for research. The principal asks the question no one wants to hear. Is it stronger than the Arachnne? The researcher confirms the Soul Mantis is in a league of its own. It wields wind magic that can slice through tank armor like paper. So, standard school security should be fine. And to top it all off, it has a powerful regenerative ability. He suggests they'll need every adventurer in Japan to even stand a chance. The principal can only stare, realizing there's no way out of this disaster. The principal can only wonder how to contain this disaster. But down below, Yuma is facing the Soul Mantis head-on. He feels something hitting him, but it's not doing any damage. The Soul Mantis seems just as baffled by his opponent's resilience. He feels like he's seen this kind of attack somewhere before. And then, a memory from his research cuts through the confusion. He remembers the metal green slime and its wind magic. He realizes the monster's wind attacks are completely useless against him. He connects the dots. The green ore he ate gave him wind resistance. He declares the Soul Mantis must be the dungeon's final boss. Yuma mentally ticks off his kills, starting with the strange spider monster. Then there were the 2 giant pill bugs he just dispatched. And he can't forget the charming, drooling centipede. He realizes defeating this final boss might just give him the mana he needs. He declares that this fight has finally given him a real motivation. He'll defeat this monster, raise his mana, and then go save Kaidi. The Soul Mantis raises its scythes, accepting his challenge. It lunges forward, ready to end this fight in a single blow. A devastating cross slash rips through the air, aimed right at Yuma. But Yuma stands completely unfazed, holding up a single finger in defiance. The monster's scythes crash against Yuma's armored form. The impact is so powerful it shatters the very ground beneath them. But Yuma stands firm, completely unharmed by the devastating blow. The 2 combatants face each other across the ruined floor. Yuma's grin widens. He confirms the monster's attacks are completely useless. The Soul Mantis unleashes another desperate flurry of attacks. But Yuma just stands there, taking every single hit without flinching. The monster finally stops, its expression one of pure confusion. It seems genuinely troubled, unable to comprehend its opponent's power. Yuma almost feels bad for it, realizing he's the worst possible matchup. He declares the fight is over. He has a friend to save. The Soul Mantis unleashes one last, desperate flurry of attacks. But Yuma is ready, morphing his arm into a devastating spiked mace. He brings it down with overwhelming force, crushing the monster into the floor. With the battle won, he looks for a way back to the 4th floor. A confident grin spreads across his face, his victory seemingly absolute. But behind him, the shattered pieces of the monster begin to twitch. Just as the researchers warned, some monsters have regenerative abilities. The Soul Mantis rises again, its body fully healed. So much for a quick fight. But Yuma's grin only widens. This just made things interesting. He roars in excitement, finally facing a worthy final boss. But a memory of his own research gives him pause. How do you beat something that just won't die? The answer is simple. Either overwhelm its healing factor or stop it entirely. Yuma considers his options, settling on a plan that's a little unconventional. He lunges forward, injecting his own liquid body directly into the monster. The black substance pours into the creature's head, a truly disgusting strategy. The Soul Mantis panics, realizing its magic has been completely sealed off. It feels its body filling with Yuma's armor, realizing it has only one way out. With a final, desperate apology, the monster begins to overload its own energy, and with a blinding flash, the Soul Mantis self-destructs in a massive explosion. Yuma's slime form declares victory over the Wind Magic Mantis. Outside, an elite team from El Cid finally arrives to begin their search. Their first discovery is the 3 missing students on the first basement floor. Kaidi is stretchered away, unconscious but thankfully alive. The El Cid captain gets a report. They've searched everywhere, but the monsters are gone. All that's left are the signs of a brutal, one-sided battle. The team looks around, trying to make sense of the impossible scene. They stand in the ruins, baffled by the complete absence of any threat. Their search leads them to a massive, destroyed fan on the 5th floor. They identify the damage as the result of a powerful wind magic attack. The El Cid captain notes the sheer power of the attack. He confirms the Soul Mantis hatched right here in the artificial dungeon, but he can't understand why it would use its magic so recklessly. Something about this entire scene just doesn't add up. They stand in the aftermath of a battle that defies all logic. They can only wonder what kind of monster could have fought here. 1 week later, the academy is still reeling from the incident. Yuma visits Kaidi, who's recovering in the hospital. She thanks Rui and Kagurazaka for saving her life, and Yuma can only agree, his own role in the rescue a complete secret. Yuma recalls his escape after the brutal final battle. He used his slime form, manifesting scythes just like the mantis. With his new appendages, he scaled the walls back to the 4th floor. But by the time he arrived, the entire area was completely deserted. He had to make a quick exit before the official rescue team spotted him. His friends deliver the official story. Rui and Kagurazaka saved Kaidi. So much for getting any credit. He realizes that while he was fighting the final boss, the entire incident had already been resolved. And now, the entire academy is celebrating the 2 prodigies. Rui and Kagurazaka are hailed as heroes, their bravery praised by all. They're even honored in a grand ceremony for saving their classmates from the monster outbreak. Kagurazaka accepts the honor with a brilliant, humble smile. The other students can only whisper in awe of their bravery. But back in Class 3, Ashiya notes the massive gap in talent. He then admits he thought Yuma was the one who ran off to save Kaidi. But Yuma knows the truth. Without magic, he's officially useless. He stands in the crowd, a silent hero lost in a sea of faces. On stage, Rui and Kagurazaka are showered with praise and applause. The gossip continues. Major corporations are already scouting the 2 prodigies. So much for a quiet school life. Their futures are set, their paths paved with gold and glory. But a sudden voice cuts through the noise, calling out Yuma's name. Kaidi asks Yuma why he's so spaced out, but he quickly brushes it off. But then, a sudden memory seems to flash through her mind. She tells Yuma that something strange happened during the incident. Her memory is a blur after the fall, but she remembers one thing clearly. She swears she heard Yuma's voice, a comment that makes him choke on his drink. A flashback shows her terror as his monstrous voice tried to calm her. Yuma panics internally, insisting she must be mistaken since he wasn't even there. A likely story. He tries to play it cool, but the sweat on his brow tells a different story. Kaidi looks out the window, trying to piece together the fragmented memories. She turns back to him, a question still lingering in her eyes. Yuma reflects that even if he wasn't the hero, at least his friend is safe. But back in the classroom, the dropout squad is facing a new kind of crisis. Ashiya stares in disbelief as the instructor delivers the verdict. Expulsion. The news hangs in the air, a death sentence for Yuma's newfound dream. Ashiya asks if the decision is final, but the instructor's silence is answer enough. He dismisses a final mana check, noting Yuma's stats haven't risen at all in 2 months. Yuma begs for one last chance, but the instructor insists it's completely useless. He tells Yuma it's better to realize he has no talent now, while he's still young enough to start over. He explains that with Yuma's abilities, being an adventurer is a guaranteed death sentence. And worse, his weakness would only endanger everyone around him. Yuma tries to argue, insisting his body is tough enough to handle it. But the instructor looms over him, a terrifying shadow of authority. He explains that adventurers need overwhelming power, something Yuma completely lacks, and with a dismissive gesture, he tucks the expulsion notice into Yuma's collar. The instructor tells him to find a new dream, his time at the academy officially over. It seems the entire dropout squad has met the exact same fate. So much for solidarity. And just like that, another door slams shut on Yuma's future. Time passes, and winter settles over his quiet, ordinary life. His dog Mizu is as cheerful as ever, completely oblivious to the drama. Yuma lies on the floor, a picture of absolute crushing defeat. He's back to his old routine, wasting the day away on his phone. He moves through the house like a ghost, completely aimless. He grabs a drink, his shirt a bitter, ironic reminder to turn the tables. The days blur together in a haze of quiet desperation. He sits at his desk, staring into the familiar void of his future. And then a sudden, shocking realization cuts through the fog. An entire month has passed since his expulsion from the academy. He asks himself what he's been doing this whole time. A very good question. A sign on his wall mocks him with his old, embarrassing dream. He thought his secret power would make him a hero, but reality had other plans. He looks back at the sealed crater, a monument to his illegal activities. He thinks about the consequences if he'd been caught, and the monstrous body he gained. In the end, all he got was 0 mana, and the secret knowledge that he saved Kaidi. His moping is interrupted by a sudden buzz from his phone. He picks it up, a lifeline in his sea of self-pity. It's a message from Kaidi, who's home for the holidays and wants to meet. He agrees to meet her at a local diner, a small spark of normalcy. But the person waiting for him isn't Kaidi, it's his old exam partner, Kagurazaka. She tells him he can't stay depressed forever, a fact he seems to be ignoring. She admits she was worried, and he begrudgingly admits he's glad she came. Kagurazaka asks if he's going back to university in the fall. Yuma confirms his new plan, a quiet return to college life. It was the deal he made with his parents before he even started. He admits that his dream of being an adventurer is officially dead. He quickly changes the subject, asking how Kaidi is doing. Kagurazaka happily reports her mana index has skyrocketed to 700. And to add insult to injury, she's already landed a job offer. A medical company wants to hire her as a messiah. Yuma is just stunned. She then casually mentions Rui's mana is now over 1,500. She predicts he'll break every record the Academy has ever seen. Kaidi reveals Rui is joining El Cid, the very company that's been desperate to recruit him. Yuma is floored. His friend is being scouted by the biggest elite corporation in the industry. He feels the massive gap between them again, watching them sprint toward their futures while he's left behind. Kaidi asks about his plans, but Yuma knows his only path is back to a boring college life. She smiles, admitting she was sad he got expelled, but is sure he'll find a path that's right for him. With a final word of encouragement, she leaves him to figure out his uncertain future. Back in his room, Yuma returns to his old habit of doing absolutely nothing. He lies on his bed, wondering what kind of path could possibly be right for him. His mind drifts back to the day his dream was officially crushed. A flashback shows his instructor's final words, a simple but powerful command, "Get stronger." Yuma runs into his old friends from the dropout squad, who tell him not to worry. Ashiya has decided to go back to his old job, a path that feels right for him. Hamanaka, however, is determined to find a job in the dungeon industry. Yuma watches them, admiring how they've both found their own way forward. He asks Hamanaka how he can find a job without graduating from the academy. Hamanaka explains that while the big companies are out, smaller businesses are still hiring. And just like that, a new spark of hope ignites in Yuma's eyes. Back in his room, he remembers letting that hope fade away in his depression. But now he sends a message to Hamanaka, asking for more information. Hamanaka replies instantly, offering to send all the job data he's gathered. He scrolls through the job list, realizing even these smaller companies are a legitimate path to becoming a searcher. But his 0 mana, expulsion, and secret powers are a laundry list of disadvantages he can't ignore. He stares at his old goal, realizing he never took it down because a part of him never truly gave up. For the first time, he has a real dream, and he's determined to make it a reality. He remembers the deal with his parents. He has 2 months to land a job before his college life resumes. This is his last chance. If he fails now, he has to give up his dream for good and get a normal job. With a new fire in his eyes, he starts picking companies from the list and preparing his applications. Yuma declares his job hunt officially begins now, his goal of becoming a searcher reignited. But 2 weeks later, his phone delivers the first crushing blow, a rejection email. His confidence shatters as he wonders why he keeps getting rejected over and over again. He realizes he was too picky, only applying to top-tier companies. So begins a frantic scramble to apply anywhere that will take him. And finally, a glimmer of hope. An invitation to an interview. He reflects on his initial rejections, a harsh lesson in humility. He's just grateful that dungeon-related companies are still hiring mid-year. Heading to his first interview, he's sure he can land at least one offer. He believes if he can just show his passion, a company will surely take a chance on him. With a renewed sense of purpose, he heads into the city to secure his future. But the reality of a corporate interview is far more terrifying than any monster. He's just one face in a long line of identical suits, all fighting for the same dream. He's stunned by the sheer number of other applicants. He realizes they all look like intelligent college students. He tries to convince himself that smarts don't matter for this job. But the first applicant is a licensed dungeon rescuer, and the next is an elite university student with extensive experience. Yuma realizes with dawning horror that brains might actually matter. He's completely outclassed by their prestigious backgrounds. So much for just showing up with a good attitude. The interviewers even seem to know the other applicants' professors. And then, the dreaded words echo through the room. Next. Yuma stands, his only qualification being a vague promise of experience. The interviewers note his age, surprised to see someone so young. But Yuma is sure his passion will be enough to win them over. Until they ask the one question he was dreading, his mana index. He's forced to admit that his mana is and always has been 0. The interviewer connects the dots. He's a dropout from the academy, and with a polite dismissal, Yuma's interview comes to a crushing end. The city seems to move on without him, indifferent to his failure. He sits on a park bench, the weight of his rejection settling in. He can only grit his teeth, another dream slipping through his fingers. He remembers the boy he was, vowing to prove he had what it takes. He's haunted by the memory of his own past arrogance. He berates himself for being so naive, for underestimating the real world. He finally understands his parents' concerns. They saw this coming all along. He wonders if he should have just listened and gone to college. But his spiral is interrupted by a hand offering him a can of coffee. The stranger is another young man, also dressed in a suit for an interview. He tells Yuma to drink up, noting he looks like he's about to die. How kind. The man reveals they were at the same interview just moments ago. He admits he's sure he failed too, but saw Yuma's face and felt bad for him. Yuma takes the coffee, noting the stranger's distinct accent. The stranger is surprised, assuming Yuma was from Kansai. He asks Yuma's age, shocked to learn he's only 18. Yuma admits he underestimated how competitive the field is. The man explains that times have changed. The job is safer now. With less risk and high pay, everyone wants a piece of the action. He says being an adventurer is now seen as a stable dream job, a realization that hits Yuma like a ton of bricks. The stranger tells him not to get so hung up on this one rejection. After all, there are plenty of fish in the sea of unemployment. He introduces himself as Akito Tanoji, hoping they'll meet again. Yuma gives his own name and the two part ways with a promise. Yuma watches the stranger go, a small act of kindness in a brutal day. He figures a guy that friendly could probably talk his way into any job. Akito was strange, but his words did manage to lift Yuma's spirits. He remembers the other applicant, the one with the dungeon rescuer license. He recalls his own foolish assumption that danger would scare people away. He realizes his knowledge is limited to academy lessons and internet searches. This realization sends him on a new mission, deep into the city at night. He steps into a bookstore, a place he hasn't visited in a long time. He's surrounded by a mountain of knowledge he never knew existed. He understands now that the internet only showed him a fraction of the world. He realizes he can't just rely on passion to get by. He vows that his next interview will be different. But the interviewers are already weary of unqualified applicants. Yuma insists he has the drive, but the man seems unconvinced. The interviewer knows the industry has changed with stricter rules, and every company wants an employee who's ready from day one. At his next interview, a woman asks the one question he fears most. She explains that a 0 mana index is a huge problem, a really, really huge problem. She politely suggests that a college degree might have helped his case. And with a final rejection, he's told to come back after university. And with that, Yuma hits rock bottom, completely and utterly defeated. He curses himself, wishing he could just tell them about his real abilities. He can turn into a monster, a slime, even a puddle, but apparently none of that is on the application. He realizes every single company has the same requirement, a mana index. So, like any desperate job seeker, he turns back to his phone for answers. His search leads him to a public employment service, a far cry from the elite corporations. and a single result gives him a sudden, shocking jolt of hope. He finds himself at the local Hello Work office, the last resort for the unemployed. He asks an employee if there are any seeker jobs, getting a less than enthusiastic response. The man explains the jobs are with smaller companies, but Yuma insists he'll take anything he can get. Yuma insists he'll take any seeker job, his desperation clear. The employee hands him an envelope with the available listings. He walks away, a single folder representing his last chance. But a glance back reveals his lingering uncertainty. He spots a rack of flyers asking what they're for. They're ads for companies with few applicants, some dungeon-related. Yuma approaches the rack, a new path opening before him. He carefully sifts through the flyers looking for a miracle. He pulls one out, a familiar name catching his eye. It's for a company called D-Miner, with a mascot that looks like it was drawn by a child. He recognizes the company, D-Miner, from the list his friend sent him. It was the smallest firm with the lowest pay, a place he'd immediately ignored. But a new thought cuts through the despair. Bad conditions mean less competition. He's been aiming for the top, but now he wonders if that was the wrong approach all along. His exhausted mind lands on a new strategy, apply to the worst places first. A solid plan. With a grimace and a surge of desperation, he decides to just go for it. At this point, he'll take any offer, just for a moment of peace. And so, he heads back out into the bustling city for one last shot. His destination is a small office tucked away in a quiet shopping district. With a new, if slightly unhinged, strategy, Yuma marches toward his final interview. He arrives at a rundown building, questioning if this is the right address. The climb up a dangerously steep staircase doesn't improve his first impression. He steps into an office that looks more like a forgotten storage unit. He announces his arrival to a mountain of paperwork on an empty desk. A cheerful voice from off-screen tells him to wait just a moment. A young woman appears, apologizing for the mess with a bright smile. She makes small talk, asking about his commute to the office. Yuma can't help but notice how different this feels from the corporate giants. So far, so good. He tries to start the interview, but she quickly stops him. She clarifies she's just an office worker. The president will be handling his interview. Yuma is completely floored by the word president, as the woman cheerfully calls for her boss. She heads to a back room, telling the president to wake up because his interview has arrived. A groggy young man emerges, wondering if it's really that late already. But the voice belongs to a much older, more intimidating man who tells Yuma to take a seat. And Yuma is once again struck by the sheer, unhinged energy of this tiny company.